This is the Deseret News, Sunday edition, when your family needs to know more.
Good morning and welcome to this first edition of the Deseret News Sunday edition. I'm Dave McCann. This broadcast will highlight 6 areas of editorial emphasis: family, faith in the community, excellence in education, values in media and culture, causes related to helping the poor, and financial responsibility. Each Sunday, we'll go in depth on these topics and bring you insights from voices around the country. This morning, we turn our attention to religious liberty.
Religious conflict left in the wake of court rulings on same-sex marriage and the Affordable Care Act's contraception mandate.
It absolutely says the federal government has no standing to come into a religious institution and tell them what to do.
There are also reports of a crackdown on Christian speak in the armed services and a growing trend of local anti-discrimination ordinances protecting the LGBT community. These are new battles in a long-standing culture war that has historically targeted religious expression in schools and on government property.
In many countries, including the United States, religious freedom is slowly and dangerously eroding.
With the launch of this Facebook page, the LDS Church joined the growing chorus of faith groups around the country seeking to engage followers in the issue of religious freedom.
I've seen this erosion in matters of individual conscience, expression, and self-determination. But this is not a concern for religious people only. For many reasons, all citizens benefit from a robust and vigorous religious freedom.
Faith communities rallying their members is a key element for advocacy groups that are championing religious liberty as a policy issue or at the ballot box.
It is government's unalterable duty to protect every religion, every religious belief, and every peaceful religious practice.
Religious liberty is a unique issue that crosses over the liberal and conservative political divide.
And it is a pleasure to welcome to the program Christina Arriaga in Washington, D.C. She's the executive director of the Becket Fund for Religious Liberty, and Paul Edwards, the editor of the Deseret News. Thank you for being with us.
It's great to be here, Dave.
Christina, let's start with you. Define this religious liberty that we're talking about today.
Religious liberty is the ability to live according to our deeply held convictions. And this is said beautifully in the First Amendment of our Constitution, which says that the government cannot establish a religion, but also that the government cannot interfere in the exercise of that religion. Religious beliefs are the most important part of our rights. It's what we take to work, it's how we use our free speech, it's how we live our lives.
Paul, how is everything that Christina just laid out for us under attack, as it were?
Well, the idea that bureaucrats and established interests are interested in suppressing religious diversity is not a new concept. I mean, this is as old as the Republic. But for a long period of time, courts really recognized that there's a strong presumption of religious freedom. And just a little over 20 years ago, the courts, the Supreme Court, made an about-face with that kind of presumption of freedom, and they really gave the upper hand again to bureaucrats and established interests. And what we've seen over the last while is that in a number of arenas, we see bureaucratic control of religious expression and discussion in the public sphere, in the workplace. And so people of faith are finding that their beliefs are being squeezed out of discussions, and their ability to practice their religion, dress in ways that are appropriate with their conscience, are under attack in the country right now.
Christina, is this a red state, blue state issue, a Republican, Democrat issue, or has it got everybody involved?
Absolutely not. This involves everyone. A healthy democracy cannot exist unless we have the ability to live according to our deeply held principles. Only 20 years ago, Congress adopted the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, and that was done unanimously under President Clinton. Congress also adopted the Religious Land Use and Institutionalized Person Act. These were 2 pieces of legislation that were adopted by Republicans and Democrats, sitting side by side, holding hands, and proclaiming that religious liberty is a human right. And they recognize that because our rights do not come from the state. They come from something beyond the state. And there is no need for this issue to be partisan.
We talk about apathy, we talk about voter apathy. Is this an apathy issue here, even in the state of Utah, where most folks have no idea that, that religious freedom is under attack? And what does it say about the LDS Church specifically getting involved to defend it?
Well, I am concerned about that apathy because for most of us, we recognize that we're able to go to places of worship on our Sabbath day, right. And there aren't, direct threats that way. But for me, I think we should be very concerned about what I call the slow violence against religious conscience that's happening in places like licensing agencies with accreditation bodies and so on. What we see, Dave, is in places like Michigan, a nurse can lose her license if she doesn't agree to perform an abortion, which would go against her strongly held religious beliefs. We see doctors being sued in California if they don't participate in vitro fertilization for a same-sex couple, where they may have, again, a conscientious concern about that. We see workplaces where religious minorities whose dress and grooming, for example, Sikhs who have certain kinds of dress and grooming standards, are with impunity excluded from the public workplace if there's a uniforming standard in place for them. So a lot of bureaucratic rules that may affect someone's license, the ability of a social service agency to provide counseling in the way that they see fit. These things are under threat in our workplaces.
Christina, what do you want to see folks do about it, especially here in Utah?
Get up and get involved. It is so important to, first of all, know the facts. A lot of Americans just don't know them. I mean, we have taken for granted the fact that we have religious liberty in this country, and that is being eroded. Many families in Utah have very, very vivid memories of persecution because of their religious beliefs. I myself am Cuban American. My father escaped Castro's Cuba. My mother escaped a concentration camp in Germany. We came to this country because we believed that the government cannot touch what's in our hearts or what's in our minds. And unfortunately, the government now is imposing several bureaucratic statutes and regulations that are slowly eroding away. So get involved, be informed, subscribe to the Becket Fund newsletter, find out what's going on in your community. It's going to be very difficult for your children to make a living unless they leave their beliefs at the door. That is not what America is about. That is un-American, and it's unprecedented to live that way.
Christine, real quick on the Becket Fund. It's actually set up to defend this, this process you're talking about. Tell us just a little bit more about that.
Sure. The Becket Fund for Religious Liberty has existed for the last 18 years. We have taken over 167 cases. We represent all of our clients without charging them. We represent them pro bono. And we represent the whole gamut of religious traditions. We like to say from Anglican to Zoroastrian. We have had many cases in which individuals have been having difficulties, particularly with the government, both state and federal government, because of the religious practices. One of the cases we have right now involves Hobby Lobby. This is a private entrepreneur. It's a Christian. It's an arts and crafts store. They have always run it like Christians. They want to pay homage to God in everything they do. They close on Sundays. They also allow their employees to go home earlier so they can be with their family. And the government has told them that unless they pay for contraceptives that are abortion-causing drugs, that the government will fine them $1.3 million per day. That case is likely to go to the Supreme Court. This can happen to any business in the United States. In fact, there are over 200 plaintiffs involved in the cases associated with health and human services. Even if this does not affect your family, you have to stand for the rights of the other families that are involved in this, because when any family suffers in the United States because of their religious beliefs, it takes away the religious beliefs of anyone that is involved in this.
And
it's
Paul,
going to be very... I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was saying, Paul, the Deseret News also renewed emphasis on this very topic.
Well, yes, Dave, really critical for the functioning of a democracy are those kinds of attributes of self-governance that social philosophers for centuries have recognized come from active religious faith. And so we think that it's just essential for the well-functioning of a democracy, for our civil society, that active faith be promoted, encouraged, and so this slow erosion of different rights presents a concern. In Utah, we could get involved in helping to encourage the passage of what's called the Religious Freedom Restoration Act at the state level. Many states have passed this kind of legislation that has done what the Supreme Court took away many years ago, which was this presumption of religious liberty when the balance between bureaucratic control and religious liberty come into conflict.
All right, we'll look for more reports. We thank Christina. We had her on satellite from Washington, D.C. She's continuing her weekend. We'll let you continue yours, Paul. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Great to be with you, Dave.
Up next, the inspiring story of the Fish family and how to balance care between sick family members and healthy ones. This is the Deseret News Sunday edition. When serious illness hits a family, it hits everybody. In this week's family section, we're discussing the care the entire family needs when battling a chronic illness. First, we want to introduce you to the Fish family. Two of their girls were born with a nearly non-existent immune system. The rare disease is called leaky skin, and it's forced them to live in a sort of bubble. So they treasure every moment they get to live as a normal family. The high-flying adventures of a simple toy recently gave them an opportunity to do that and lifted their spirits to unbelievable heights.
Saturday morning, just after sunrise.
We are getting quite a few people here.
A few clouds and no wind.
Are you guys getting pumped? This is the
perfect conditions for a balloon launch.
Yeah.
That balloon is going to outer space.
And it's carrying a superhero named Blair and GoPros to capture his journey.
Now, the reason why we're doing this is because we promised Blair a hero party for when he
This is the real Blair.
Donated his marrow to his sister, Natalie.
There are a lot of heroes in this crowd, including Big Brother Matthew.
He had to be the happy one that had to keep everybody else happy and kept us going every single day.
The Fish family credits a lot of people for keeping them going.
The whole community, not just neighbors, but the whole community, the word spread, rallied up and buoyed us up and relieved our burdens.
To understand just how much this moment means to the Fish family, we need to take you back to these moments.
As a parent, one of the hardest things is to watch your child suffer. And when you wonder if there's an end in sight, it can be so discouraging.
Natalie and Alice have spent most of their lives in and out of hospitals, their bodies ravaged by illness, infections, and painful treatments. When we first met the girls, Natalie was preparing for her bone marrow treatment. Blair provided the perfect match.
You're a hero.
Alice would soon follow, also receiving a perfect match, but from an anonymous donor.
Hi, buddy. It's just so amazing to know that somebody out there who doesn't even know you wants to do good.
For the first 100 days, the girls had to live in a sterile environment, everything around them thoroughly clean.
And when he touched the faucet, I wiped it, and all the spices and everything, I wiped them all down because, there's a chance she could touch the same thing.
So far, Natalie's transplant has been a success, and for the first time, this soon-to-be 10-year-old is living like a fairly normal child. Earlier this year, Make-A-Wish granted a dream vacation to Hawaii.
I think it was the first time she was smiling, like really happy, smiling in a long time. It was so weird. We were normal.
But normal still comes with a catch. This is the Fish family pharmacy. Imagine if you had to keep track of all these medications. But on this day, a brief reprieve.
It's nice to have something else to think about.
A celebration of sacrifice, hope, and life.
Go.
Bye, Blair, to infinity and beyond.
A bobblehead boy lifting the spirits of a family that has endured so much.
It was a culmination of a lot of emotion. I'm not as proud as the launch as I am of my, as my son Blair.
As bobblehead Blair soars into the atmosphere,
it's gone further north.
Tyler
east,
tracks the journey,
probably 100,000
and Lizzie
feet.
prepares another round of medicine.
I should have been a pharmacist.
Oh, that is pretty cool.
Hey, Natalie, can you take your medicine and I'll go get your inhalers? Hold it.
Even the slightest cough from Natalie still causes panic.
Nights are fairly restless and worrisome, and then morning comes and we feel relief and gratitude when our girls wake up. Okay, take the pills and drink your water and swish, okay?
Natalie grows stronger every day, while Alice's battle continues.
It's a little bit warm.
With Alice, we understand how serious her case is because we just don't really know how to fix it just yet.
She is a little medical mystery.
May I have kids crew?
And a favorite, frequent patient at Primary Children's Medical Center.
This finger still.
But Alice doesn't let it all get in the way of her play.
She's a tough cookie. Sometimes it's the little things that want some more, keep us going.
Little things like a toy tied to a weather balloon that reached space and then tumbled back to Earth. The landing near Colville was a bit rough, but this family knows all about tough journeys.
We found it!
You fight until there's nothing left to fight for.
A family of superheroes. Together, Tyler, Lizzie, and their Cape Crusaders will keep fighting for each other and for life, into infinity and beyond.
Alice scheduled to receive her second bone marrow transplant on October 17th. We wish her and the rest of her family the best of luck. Victoria White is a child life specialist at Primary Children's Medical Center. Thank you for being with us this morning.
I'm excited to be here.
There are so many challenges for families when they deal with a sick child. For the rest of the family, what do you see in your day-to-day up at the hospital that has kind of taught you a few things about this?
Definitely one of the first things is how hard it is to balance it all. Because parents, you know, they want to be the best parent they can be, and it's hard to find that balance between home life, work life, and also what's happening at the hospital.
So in your expert opinion, what's first on the list that you would tell every family that has this challenge?
First thing on my list for parents especially is self-care. They need to be able to take time away, focus on how they can find themselves some coping mechanisms.
Diet, sleeping, all that stuff?
Diet, sleeping, taking time away to just get a breather, you know, go to the gym, something like that, so that they can focus a little better and it'll help them make harder decisions.
Is that what, there's so much stress involved in that. Even when your kid has the flu for a week, there's a lot of stress, but a chronic one that's not going to go away, managing that stress through diet, sleep, and all that other stuff seems to be paramount.
It is, and a lot of people forget about it because there's so many other things going on with their kids that they just focus on the kids and forget they need to take time for themselves too.
Okay, so shoring up, number one,
yes,
is number one on the list. What's number two?
Number two would be communication, especially with the siblings involved. They want to know what's happening, they want to understand it, they want to have a role and a choice if they can.
And a lot of times we cut them out, don't we? Because it's like, hey, we don't want to burden them, or they want to understand it. It's just going to be adult discussion, and that causes a gulf here, right?
Yeah, and especially if you think about it, the kids, when you're on the phone with your neighbor or your friend and you're telling them about what's happening at the hospital, the kids are listening in the backseat of the car, and they're hearing all these adult conversations, and they're not quite sure what it means. So taking the time to communicate to them what it is and what's happening.
Okay, number three.
Number three, I would say connect as a family. Taking the time to put all the medical things aside for a night. Maybe it's a game night, maybe you go out for ice cream, something simple, but remembering at the end of the day you're a family, and that's important.
Where can folks go for more information on this?
You know, we have information on the Primary Children's Hospital website, but there's also a lot of great online communities for teens and for younger kids to connect with others who are having similar experiences at home.
Appreciate the work you do, Victoria. Thank you.
No problem.
Good to have you with us. Coming up on Deseret News Sunday edition, how to start a discussion about money with your aging parents. Welcome back. In this morning's MoneyWise segment, we're discussing senior silence and why talking about money with your aging parents might be difficult, but well worth it. Michael DeGroot writes about financial responsibility for the Deseret News. Thank you for being with us.
It's great to be here.
Why do we not like to talk to our parents about money?
Well, it's not so much that we might not want to talk about it as much as they might not want to talk about it, because you have all these issues of independence and trust and other sort of things and control that they have. And so that's maybe part of it, and we don't want to approach these sort of things where we feel like we're mortal.
All right, so in your expertise, as I'm having this conversation with my mother, how do I get her to open up about her books?
Well, you might be overstepping your bounds. You might not be the time to do that.
Right.
I mean, to say, you know, give me your checkbook or whatever.
Well, you'd have to say it with a lot of grace. And
yes, and that's the thing. And
pizzazz.
there are techniques and things you could do. For example, it's not just important for seniors, but for everybody to have a plan of what happens if you have cognitive decline. That could come suddenly with an accident to you or anybody else. And so coming together as a family and talking about these as a family might be the best approach to do it.
And for aging parents, there's some pride there of, I don't want to give up my independence, and I've still got everything under control, so I'm not going to let you in, and that's a stumbling block.
Well, you know, the parent-child sort of thing, it's always going to be in place. But the studies show that 86% of the people said they would trust a family member to help handle their affairs, and that means their medical problems or also their financial problems. Yet, about 69% of people say that there are major barriers in place, and that could be, like you say, that could be financial independence, it could be people who are refusing to recognize a problem, or they're just embarrassed that they might not be able to do things as easily as they used to.
If you're an older parent watching this morning, what do you want them to do?
Well, the thing is, I've talked to several experts about this. They recommend that you don't wait until you start forgetting to do your bills or things like that, because by then it may be too late to make your wishes known. But a good time to start is when you retire, around age 65, is to get together, and you don't have to be precise about everything, just to have a conversation about, you know, if this happens, I'd like this to happen. If I had this medical problem, I wouldn't want this kind of procedure to be done. All those sort of things. And there's a lot of other things that can be done as well, you know, from setting up trusts to having living wills as well.
Truth be told, all that is going to happen as we get old. So it's inevitable, and so we might as well be ready.
Yeah, as you're old, or to anybody.
Yeah. All right. You can read much more from Michael in the Deseret News. The article is Senior Silence, and we encourage everybody to take a look at it. Thank you for being with us this morning.
Thank you.
Appreciate your insight. And we thank you for watching the first edition of the Deseret News Sunday edition. I'm Dave McCann. We'll be back next Sunday and every Sunday after that at 9 o'clock. And I'll be back later this afternoon at 4 with a one-on-one special Faith and Family featuring Ann Romney, Bishop John C. Wester, LDS Relief Society President Linda Burton, and BYU football coach Bronco Mendenhall. That's coming up this afternoon at 4 o'clock right after General Conference. Music and the Spoken Word is up next, and we'll see you next Sunday.